Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Is it worth a shot in 2024? Well, after putting off playing it for far too long, I finally decided to dive in, and I'm hoping I can help answer that very question by the end of this video. So, what exactly is Kakarot? Well, first and foremost, it's an RPG, and a big one at that. The game is packed full of elements that lend itself to the genre. That's not to say there isn't quite a bit of just straight up fighting. It is a Dragon Ball game, of course, and that combat actually looks and feels pretty satisfying. But don't be mistaken, the combat is very different than, for instance, what you would find in a game like Tenkaichi or Raging Blast. We're gonna touch on the game's RPG characteristics, combat, and more, but our first topic of discussion is going to be what stood out to me the most from the moment I picked up the game: the presentation. Whether you're exploring the vast open world, watching cutscenes, or in the thick of combat, the game presents itself phenomenally. The graphics look damn good and really make me feel like I've been thrown right into an episode of the anime. Honestly, it might even look better. Just look how incredible the Spirit Bomb scene looks.
All right, it's done!
Release it!
No! I will not be defeated!
Now, I know some folks have complained about some of the character models in-game, but honestly, nothing has really stood out to me during my playtime. I thought the character models looked pretty solid. Particle effects from things like charging your ki blasts, and super attacks look great. Vanishing to move around, dodge attacks, and connect with melee hits on your opponents looks very Dragon Ball-like, I would say. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, the game just looks good in essentially all aspects, and I can't think of any complaints I had during my playtime with it so far. It really does a good job of recreating the look of the anime. The graphics aren't the only thing that are well done though. Audio design is also great. The soundtracks, sound effects, and voice acting are all really well done. Side quests aren't voice acted, but the main story is, and I felt like the voice actors really nailed it here with performances that delivered consistently throughout my playtime. Some of the more iconic moments from the show were done to perfection in my opinion, but I'll let you be the judge of that.
Krillin! No! Let him go, Frieza! Goku!
And now for the little brat.
You're gonna pay for that!
What?
So, moving on from the game's presentation, what is the gameplay loop actually like in Kakarot? I've mentioned that it's an RPG, but also that it has quite a bit of combat. So, how do those two come together? Well, the game has a vast open world that you navigate with whatever character you're controlling at a given point in time, which is determined by where you are in the story. The world is filled with all sorts of things to find, from Z-orbs that you can fly around and collect that are used for upgrading your characters, to fishing holes, characters that give side quests, and much more. You're free to navigate this open world as you see fit. You can run across the ground at super speed, fly around, go into underwater areas to explore, fire ki blasts, which are useful for hunting big dinosaurs for their meat or destroying enemy bases. It's almost like taking the world from the story mode of Tenkaichi 2 and expounding upon it exponentially. Combat doesn't take place freely while you're roaming the open world though. Instead, it happens when you transition into combat, either by running into some of the enemies that are sprinkled throughout the map, or when you trigger a main or side quest event. Which now's a good time to talk about combat. Earlier, I mentioned that it's different from what you would expect in a typical Dragon Ball 3D fighter like Tenkaichi or Raging Blast. Kakarot definitely doesn't have that amount of depth to its combat, but does that make it bad or not as enjoyable? Well, that's something that only you'll be able to judge, but personally, I enjoyed it even if it did take a bit of adjustment. The biggest reason for it feeling so off, in my opinion, is the default controls. Having your melee attack on circle or B if you're on Xbox just feels wrong. Really, the whole control scheme took a bit of getting used to, and this is probably my biggest gripe with the game. It's not a huge deal, as after a few hours I settled into the controls, although sometimes I do still find myself going to spam key blasts with triangle, only to find myself charging key. Once you get past that adjustment period for learning the game's, let's just call them different controls though, combat is fun. I would describe it as being more focused on creating a casual, slightly more cinematic experience. There really isn't much depth to the combo strings. Essentially, you spam your melee attack and can alter how the string ends with either triangle, square, or the X inputs. While you're in your initial melee string though, you can interrupt it by using X to vanish, and when you do so, you essentially interrupt your string, putting you back in the beginning. So you can use this to extend your quote-unquote combo a bit, but unless I'm just missing something, that seems to be the only option for doing so. Super attacks are accessed by holding down L1 and pressing a single corresponding input, and as long as you have enough ki, the attack will be executed. Transformations are accessed in a similar manner by holding down L1 and R1 and using their corresponding input. The feel of combat takes a bit to get used to. You sort of have to learn when you can safely attack and interrupt your opponents without having to worry about them retaliating. You'll notice that sometimes enemies will have a red glow around them as they're charging an attack, and during this time, melee attacks you land won't stagger them. If you stick around for too long, you'll get hit and take a chunk of damage. Certain boss-like enemies, like some of the main villains you encounter and fight in the story, also have completely unique attacks with their own mechanics that typically involve you having to fly or vanish in a certain manner in order to evade them. Some specific examples of this are when Raditz uses his double Sunday technique, or when Dodoria uses his maximum buster. Which, defeating strong enemies like this and progressing through the story is by far the easiest way to gain large chunks of experience, which of course is needed to level up. And I think this is a perfect segue into the game's multiple RPG mechanics. Leveling up, as you would expect, is achieved by gaining experience by completing various tasks in the game. Doing so increases your character's power by a significant margin, but there's a lot more going on here than just leveling up your character to become stronger. Remember those Z-orbs I mentioned earlier that you can fly around and collect in a manner that reminds me just a little too much of Superman 64? Those can be used to help level up your character through a super attack skill tree, which allows you to enhance various abilities your character possesses and unlock new abilities. Although the latter requires you to complete special training sessions that can be accessed in the open world. The game also has a mechanic known as the Community Board, which, to fully explain how it works, will require me to mention another item: Soul Emblems. Soul Emblems are essentially representations of characters that you've unlocked by encountering them, or fulfilling various requirements like playing through the story or completing side quests. The different character Soul Emblems have various stats that allow them to contribute more efficiently to different community boards that they've been placed in. There's a total of 7 community boards available, and each one gives various skill bonuses based on their level. To increase their level, you can add the various Soul Emblems that you've collected into empty slots on the boards. Furthermore, placing certain characters next to one another on the board and linked slots has the potential to give further bonuses. This allows you to choose what aspects of gameplay you want to enhance. Want to be more effective in direct combat? Focus on the Z-Warrior board to gain things like bonus melee or key attack damage. Want to level up quicker or gain more Z-Orbs from completing battles? Then focus on improving your training or Community of the Gods boards. As you play through the game, you'll even receive gifts that can be given to your various characters in order to increase their community level, which further increases the bonuses they give to the corresponding board they're placed on. Personally, I've grown to really like this system, although it was a little intimidating at first, as the game just sort of throws a ton of information at you in the beginning, and then that's pretty much it as far as instruction goes. The game also features a cooking mechanic, allowing you to cook dishes, as well as full course meals that include all sorts of various ingredients, and they actually give pretty nice stat bonuses. They perfectly fit the theme of Dragon Ball 2. I mean, how can a fan of the series not appreciate this? If all this wasn't enough, the game also includes a standalone trading card game called Card Warriors. It features a set of tutorials that explains the basics, and it's actually surprisingly good. I really wasn't expecting something like this at all. Kudos to them for including this in the game. I could actually see some folks spending quite a lot of time in here. So, is Dragon Ball Z Kakarot worth it in 2024? If you're a Dragon Ball fan, I would say absolutely. Especially if you can pick up the Legendary Edition at a discounted price, which includes all the game's DLCs. We didn't talk about those here, but they're quite extensive and we'll be surely covering them in a future video. As of right now, I've only played through the Namek arc and the game has been absolutely blowing me away. Stay tuned for more Kakarot coverage. Thanks for watching. Until next time.